Good. So I think we still have 2 minutes to go before we start.
Yeah, and
I
all
hope
the
Lorenzo, can you?
are here. Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. Good. Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear my voice, Rene?
Yes, Lorenzo, we can hear you well.
Okay, thank you so much.
We can't see your video, Lorenzo.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, now you're
I'm
there.
sorry, I cannot have the back because it doesn't fit with my computer. There was a mismatch with the face. I apologize for that.
It's okay. It's okay. Your background is okay.
Okay, thank you so much. I just go mute.
Good. So this is to all the attendees. Thanks very much for making time to follow our webinar. I will invite you all to switch off your videos and mute your microphones. Yeah, that is going to reduce the bandwidth. Please, for the attendees, not the panelists, kindly switch off your videos and mute your microphones. Yes. So.
Renee, are you there?
Start.
Yeah, I see your video is not moving just now. Okay, you're there.
Okay, very good. Good morning to everybody, and thanks very much for making time to join in our webinar series, and this particular one on sustainable management of bamboo rattan resources. And our theme today is on innovative applications of bamboo and rattan and development of the rattan sector. I am very humbled to be your host today. I am Rene Cam. I work for INBA and I'm based in Cameroon. And I would be co-hosting this session with my colleague, Jin Wei, who is based in China. So today we have three great panelists who are going to subsequently share their knowledge on different aspects of Rattan. But before introducing our panelists, I would like us to learn that Rattan are spiny climbing palms who are flexible stem and that they provide canes which are usually used for commercial purposes. This is because the rattan cane, they have a good strength, they are light, they are durable, and they are flexible. It is also possible to change their appearances if we apply some paint. So generally we have about 600 different rattan species around the world, and around 700 million people depend on rattan for their livelihoods. So this traditional application of rattan has been used for decades, and it continues to be used for furniture, for basketry, for internal decoration. But recently, new applications of rattan have been discovered. And one of the most catching one is the application of rattan in medicine. Today, there is possibility to use rattan for biomedical application in orthopaedic. Green bone, which is represented today by Lorenzo, that I will introduce later on, is developing technologies to use rattan as bone replacement. So this is the context within which we are organizing this Rattan webinar. And our objective today is to inform different Rattan stakeholders on the innovative applications of Rattan in general and in medical sector in particular, to enhance the awareness of the economic potential of Rattan and its contribution to the livelihood of local people. So we hope to be together for around 1.5 hours, including our question and answer session. Today, we are going to have 3 speakers. Our first speaker would be Mr. Lorenzo Pradella, who is based in Italy. So Lorenzo is the co-founder and the CEO of Greenbone Ortho Cell, which is a new company that develops a highly innovative rattan wood derivative biometric for wood replacement. So we have to mention that Lorenzo has a background in pharmacology, business and innovation with more than 25 years of experience in this domain. He has contributed severally in a lot of researches related to pharmacology and bone replacement in general. So I would like to invite Lorenzo to switch on his video, share his screen, and deliver his presentation. So Lorenzo, you have a maximum of 25 minutes for your presentation. Please, could you share your screen with us? Yes,
Yeah,
please.
can you see
Lorenzo, yeah, we can see. The floor is yours. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, René. Thank you so much to everybody of IMBAR organization and the R&D. It's a great opportunity for me to be here with you and my colleague Alberto Ballardini, which is also online. We are proud to share with all of you what we are doing in the orthopedic field using rattan as a raw material. Our company is called Greenbone Ortho, and as you can immediately capture for the name, we are focused on the orthopedic and in particular on the regeneration of bone that is damaged by different reasons. I'm gonna share with you in a minute. An important fundamental point is that regeneration of bone to cure damages is extremely complicated. Is a very difficult tissue to reconstruct with the aim to give a patient the hope to return having its natural bone. And this is what we are trying to achieve with our innovative product. The company was founded in 2014 based on a research that we translated from the bench, from the lab to the hospital. The technology is patent protected, and the company is a private company, venture capital funded, that was able to raise about $25 million since the inception. These are kind of patients that we want to treat. As you can see, severe damages. We are talking about severe damages where patient has to become subject to a surgery that need to insert in the body an external material that can leverage and can bridge the pre-existing cortex after the damage. Normally, the gold standard is bone transplantation, but there are alternatives like allografts, so bone from bank, that means cadaver bone, or other synthetic material. Particularly for segmental defects, the risk of complication is very high, and there is a very poor capacity, except bone transplantation to regenerate the damaged bone. So we want to offer the orthopedic surgeon a real alternative that can even compete with bone transplantation. Why Rattan? Because as you can appreciate from this slide, Rattan has a high similarity in its internal organization, its internal architecture with natural bone. Where in wood the xylem vessels pass through, in bone there are blood vessels. And for this reason, researchers have been able to develop a technology that allow us today to take rattan, particularly rattan manao, we shape it, we decorticate the can, and then we shape it accordingly with the bone that we want to reconstruct and regenerate. And then thanks to our process that is, it's based on 7 subsequent chemical reactions, chemistry is completely transformed, but along the process, we never destroy and lose the internal 3D architecture that is provided by nature through rattan, and that resembles so closely bone architecture. So the final composition is made of hydroxyapatite, beta-3-calcium phosphate, plus some ions that replace completely the chemistry of the original wood. This allowed to achieve altogether a panel of features and characteristics and properties that are basically those that are needed to have the ambition not only to cure and treat, but also to regenerate at the same time. So having a material that over time can be resorbed and replaced by newly formed bone in order to restore the damage and providing the patient in his large extension a functional bone. This is achieved through, as I said, different characteristics that are namely osteointegration, osteoconduction, osteoinduction. But I would like you to appreciate here this CT scan and microscopic imaging that are performed on a final scaffold. So you can see on the left side of the slide the longitudinal porosity and the interconnected porosity, which is the porosity present in the original wood that we have now in our final product, and the fact that forming hydroxyapatite on an already existing 3D architecture, we can preserve, as you can see on the right picture of this slide, the nanocrystals bioactive morphology of hydroxyapatite, which is the morphology that bone cells are able to metabolize. And so this material, thanks to the right chemistry, the right architecture in terms of porosity, and the right morphology, becomes a sort of playground for cells that rapidly enter and populate the scaffold when it's introduced into the body and started to manipulate it, as is done normally with bone tissue. And so over time, the green bone material is resorbed and replaced by newly formed bone. And this was evident. Sorry, first let me introduce you the different shapes that we are able now to produce, starting from rattan. So we produce in blocks, in hollow cylinder, in wedges, and in granules, in order to offer the orthopedics surgeon all the tools that can provide solution to the range of orthopedic surgery that are normally performed. As I was saying, the material can be effective in forming new bone, and you can appreciate here. This was a study conducted in rabbits, where we have observed in ectopic region, so under the skin, that if we implant a small amount of green bone, there is a formation of de novo bone tissue, even where bone is not normally present. And this is a perfect imaging and representation of the capacity of this material to be subject and trigger bone formation. And this was further confirmed in this large study that was executed in sheep, a classical model for bone damages, where a bone defect, a critical bone defect in the ovine metatarsal bone, which is a load-bearing bone of the leg, in 6 months was completely restored. As you can see on the right side, this is a real picture. They are not cartoons. And so the gap was completely reformed and reoccupied by natural bone, where it was possible to appreciate the formation of osteon, new blood vessels. So it's a living tissue with properties that were already very close to those of the pre-existing bone of the animals. We are conducting 2 clinical studies in humans, one in the extremities, so arms and legs, and another one in the iliac crest. And from this second study, you have here a picture where a patient was implanted with a block of green bone in an area of the iliac crest where bone was harvested for bone transplantation, as a perfect model to appreciate the behavior, the safety and the performance of the material. As you can see here in the red oval, you see that over time, the density where the block is inserted becomes very close to the density of the surrounded bone, confirming that the block of green bone obtained thanks to the transformation of rattan wood became subject of a real resorption and regeneration process, providing patients a new bone in the area where the bone was missed. The product, as I said, as I mentioned before, is today's CE mark. So we achieved the approval from the European health authorities, and we are in the process also to with the FDA for the approval in the United States. This allowed the product, our bone substitute, to be ready suitable for commercialization. Here you can appreciate how the market for bone grafting, for bone substitute is attractive. Today is in the area of 3 billions, but is expected to go to 4 billions in 2025. But in addition to this, it's important to remind that the gold standard today is bone transplantation. This means that at least 50–60% of the patients are treated today through bone transplant, so bone donation from the same patients. And this represents an area of further expansion for a good product that can have really the capacity to treat and regenerate at the same time. And accordingly, the expectation for a medical device, for a bone substitute like green bone, in terms of market performance, is really significant. Where are we going? The company is expected to grow, and the growth will be driven mainly by 4 key areas. One, of course, is the expansion in the clinic of the product, either through existing study, additional study that will be performed to develop further indication, like for spine fusion, in addition to trauma, as is already approved, and the expansion of the market authorization beyond CE and hopefully US soon in other territories and other countries of the world. Production is a fundamental goal for us, and the capacity to increase production is also linked to our to the possibility to secure a stable supply chain for our raw materials, so for Rattan. This was one of the point of contact with Dimbar, and we are working to, let's say, identify further possibility to purchase Rattan for the growth of the product and the growth of the company, considering that making our thought on the world market, the supply of Rattan, the need of the supply of Rattan can will be significant in the very near future. And we really hope and expect to consolidate the supply chain with local Rattan producer, including making thought on the on sustainable plantation. Last but not least is the commercial rollout of the product, starting from trauma, which is the first market indication that has been approved, and we expect to do it very soon. Just going to conclusion, some faces that represents our company in terms of seniorities, that covers material science, of course, business as usual, regulatory and quality, which is fundamental for this kind of product in order to be successful on a worldwide basis, and the collaboration with international recognized key opinion leader in orthopedic surgeon like Peter Janudes and others behind this phase that are supporting our development in the clinic. This is our board of directors, just to see that we have also international presence, and so we have developed the product and the possibility to move Rattan to a medical device field and healthcare on a worldwide basis with an international vision. And this is the end of my presentation. I thank you all for having attending it, and of course I'm more than willing and happy to take any question that you may have. Thank you so much.
Lorenzo, thank you very much for your very insightful presentation, very rich. I'm very excited to know that today it is possible to go beyond the traditional use of Rattan for basketry and other applications to this very innovative application. So we understood that Rattan is very similar to bone in terms of the right chemistry, the right morphology, and this allows the possibility that Rattan can be used for bone replacement. We also appreciated the experimental study that was done on rabbit, and that the outcome of the result were pretty much positive. You mentioned that this technology has been approved by the European Union Health Authority, and a similar authorization is ongoing in the United States. You concluded by mentioning that the demand for Rattan would be very growing, and that it is important to establish supply chain for the Rattan in order that we should create linkages between the growers and users of Rattan like yourself. Thanks very much for this. So I would plead with you to keep on hold. We are receiving questions, and we are going to come back to you during the Q&A session. So I'm going to move to our second speaker, which is Professor Terry Sunderland from the University of British Columbia. Professor Terry is somebody that I'm very humble to introduce today. He got his Bachelor's of Science from the Royal Botanic Garden at Kew, a master's degree in University of Oxford, and his PhD from the same college in anthropology. So in 2006, he moved to the Center of International Forest Research based in Indonesia, and he led the center's research on land scale conservation, development, and food security. It should be noted that Dr. Sunderland is a well-known scientist with more than 200 journal article, books, and book chapters. So In January 2018, he was appointed Professor of Tropical Forestry at the Department of Forest and Conservation Science in the Faculty of Forestry at the University of British Columbia. It is our honor to have such a distinguished scientist who is going to entertain us today on the topic on the socioeconomic contribution of rattan in Africa. It should also be noted that Professor Terry is a member of INBA Task Force on Rattan, which is a group of experts around the world working on developing rattan guidelines. So Professor Terry, I would like to invite you to share your screen. Very good. I am able to see the screen. So please turn on your video and your microphone, and over to you for the next 25 minutes.
Both my video and microphone should be on. You should see and hear me. Is that true?
Yes, very good.
Excellent.
We can see and hear you very well.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's such a nice introduction, Renee. I'm very honored to be invited to talk to such an erstwhile forum. And it's been a while since I've worked on rattan. I did my PhD on rattan between 1996 and 2001, which is now making me feel very old. But I've continued working on various aspects of rattan over the years. And as you know, as you mentioned, actually been part of the INBA task force on rattan over the past few years, which has been, again, a singular honor. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why rattan is important in Africa and in some ways why it's different to the Asian context, and touch on some of the development issues that I think have great potential in Africa that sort of are happening in Asia, but not necessarily in Western Central Africa as yet. And one of the emphases of my sort of post-PhD studies was to try and get the rattan sector in Africa sort of on the global map. So I'll talk about some of that as this presentation unfolds. And for some reason, let's see if I can push this way. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about rattans, and as René mentioned in his introduction, rattans are climbing palms in the subfamily Calamoideae. They're characterized by having a scaly pericarp or seed coat, and you can see from the Arecaceae images the fruits there in the bottom. They've got a scaly seed coat, and that characterizes the Calamoideae. And it's until relatively recently, the taxonomy of African rattans was really, really poorly understood, despite the economic importance, particularly for rural livelihoods. We now know there are 22 species of rattan in Africa, and that's very small compared to the 600 species known from Southeast Asia. So the palm flora in general in Africa is very poor, mostly due to the vicissitudes of climate and the way that forests have shrunk and expanded over the last 10, 20,000 years. There's a lot of palm species in the pollen flora, but the extant palm species are very poorly represented. Only roughly six species have the anatomical sort of characteristics that allow themselves to be of commercial importance. So of those 22, it's a relatively small proportion. But obviously, with the development of a resource such as rattan, you need a robust sort of taxonomic framework to implement any kind of management regime. So one of the first things we produced was a field guide to the rattans of Africa, with lots of information about vernacular names, distribution, the morphology, etc. And for the 22 species, this is actually was a fairly easy product to produce. And it's proved to be, I wouldn't say a bestseller, because these things are never bestsellers, but useful in terms of field workers working on forest resources in the field. So the natural distribution of rattans in Africa is focused mostly, of course, on the humid forest zone, particularly West Central Africa, and primarily there's a large center of diversity in the Cameroon, Nigeria, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea area, where we have most of the species that occur. And we have outlying areas where there are probably one or two species. And these other areas that are ringed in black are still areas that we are pretty much unknown in terms of rattan distribution in the natural forests. So just a brief overview of African rattan taxonomy based on that research I've just presented. There are 3 genera endemic to Africa: Lacosperma, Arecaceae, and Onchocalamus. They occur nowhere else but in Africa. We have one representative of the Asian genus Calamus, which is a highly variable and diverse species, Calamus diratus, which occurs throughout much of Africa. The endemic genera morphologically are very different to all the other rattans anywhere else in the world. They climb by the aid of a whip called a cirrus, which is at the end of the leaf. And these small modified leaflets are called acanthophylls, and that's the way that they climb up into the canopy. And the Calamus species is very much like its Asian cousins. It climbs by the aid of a flagellum, which emerges from the leaf sheath and pulls itself into the canopy that way. So they're very aesthetically pleasing and very beautiful species actually in Africa, and I enjoyed working on them. And of course, throughout their range, as in Asia, rattans are used in various ways as fish traps, as farm baskets, in extreme cases. Every year, bridges are made of rattan to cross rivers. This is a cassava sieve. Raw cassava is sieved through a very fine mesh of rattan that's woven together. Obviously, furniture is a very important component of the rattan artisan industry as well, and I'll touch on that in a later slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of rattan for rural livelihoods. And this is really focusing on a project that was funded by the British government for quite a few years. We worked in the western region of Ghana, as you can see here, Cross River State, Nigeria, and southwest Cameroon, areas that are known to be major rattan producing areas. And we basically undertook both socioeconomic and ecological surveys of the rattan resource in each of these areas. So in terms of understanding the relationship between rattan, it's very much like many other NTFPs. In many of the rural areas that we sampled, farming still remains the main occupation for the majority of people who inhabit those areas. And with notable exceptions, and that village Wassa Esaman in Ghana is a village that's almost exclusively focused on rattan production. But rattan activities tend to be a sort of secondary occupation, and really are focused, aside from a very few harvesters, focused on really on times when economic necessity dictates that you go out and you need some cash. So you have a medical emergency in your family, you go out and harvest rattan. You have school fees, for example. So the periods of sort of August to September in many of these communities are periods of extreme activity in terms of rattan harvesting. And despite being a secondary activity, we've experienced from the ecological side a considerable local scarcity of most of the commercial species of rattan, and particularly in Ghana. As I mentioned, the village of Wassa Esaman was a main focus of rattan harvesters, and will facilitate harvesting gangs to come into the community and harvest sort of fairly indiscriminately in the local forest. So in terms of the sort of rural households that are involved in rattan-related activity, broken down by country, the remote settlements is stratified according to proximity to forest. The remote settlement in Ghana is the sort of main leader of rattan activities there. Excuse me. But the on-road samples are also interesting, and then the variation across the three countries is indicative of the need for accessibility to be able to evacuate your forest resource from the harvesting site. And obviously the on-road samples with access to markets were incredibly important. So that sort of halfway house between having access to both the forests and to markets and roads to transport to markets was extremely important. And unsurprisingly, in terms of products kind of generated from rattan activities, off-road examples, so more remote settlements had more rattan type articles being fabricated at the village site for sale and direct consumption. So we also undertook significant studies of looking at the production to consumption systems. So looking at also the end product, the urban artisans. And these were surveys that were undertaken in Accra in Ghana, in Lagos, Nigeria, and Douala and Yaoundé in Cameroon. And in summary, we found that our urban artisans were usually full-time independent establishments and almost exclusively male dominated. And interestingly, compared to other activities, their earnings are relatively high across all three producing countries. And the profit margins are also relatively high in comparison to other activities. So artisans focused primarily on Rattan when they were actually in their market situations, and were very loath to be distracted away from those activities, which often happens with other non-timber forest product harvesting type activities. There were reported periods of significant scarcity, particularly when rural harvesters are occupied either by farming or hunting or other activities. So it was artisans experienced sort of peaks and troughs in terms of supply to their factories. And there were across all three countries, across all the cities that we surveyed, increased scarcity, and thus the price of the raw material was highlighted due to both exploitation and poor management of the wild resource. It's an open access resource, anybody can harvest, and it's often overexploited. And one aspect of the artisan sort of world that caught our eye was the poor quality of finished products, particularly compared to Asia. And we investigated scope for improved processing and transformation, again, which I'll talk about in a subsequent slide. So just in terms of a socioeconomic profile of the urban Rattan artisans in Cameroon, we noticed that obviously most of the artisans are male, relatively sort of well-educated to secondary level, focused almost exclusively on artisan activities and not so much on other activities, which is interesting. Most purveyors of non-timber forest products tend to diversify their livelihood base. And in this case, in Rattans, they tend to focus almost solely on the harvesting resource. So with all this research that we generated, what are the implications for conservation and development? We looked in terms of developing the issue of lack of scarcity and in terms of what are the prospects of cultivation. And we did farmer trials in each of the three countries that we worked in. We looked at the development of sustainable harvesting methods. And we also talked about and introduced new processing and transformation for urban artisans using new technologies introduced from Southeast Asia. And also, obviously, try to think about the policy implications. The Rattan trade is usually part of the informal forest industry or informal forestry sector. How could we formalize the extremely valuable trade in Rattan in Central Africa, Central and West Africa? So in terms of cultivation, we did lots and lots of experiments on the commercial species in particular. Many of them had long germination periods and a long establishment phase, but we found that growth rates were extremely good once the species were established. And this picture here shows Arecaceae secundiflorum planted under Hevea brasiliensis, under rubber in Cameroon. Growth rates were extremely good and comparable with those of Southeast Asia, some of the commercial species, and a relatively short cropping cycle. So it's very basically ecologically and economically viable. But we found that in terms of farmer acceptance and adoptability, poor land and resource tenure was a major impediment to farmers adopting Rattan cultivation in particular. And migrant farmers who had almost no land tenure, essentially annual contracts on rental of farmland, didn't want to get involved in planting longer term crops at all. There was also an unwillingness to cultivate an untested product, so something that really had not been cultivated before. So there was a lack of engagement from that perspective. And the fact that the planting material was no better than that was being grown in the wild. And conceptually, a lot of the farmers said to us, well, if it's in the forest, why would we want to grow it in our farms? It doesn't make any sense. So that sort of permeates through the whole non-timber forest products sort of sector, where as soon as something becomes valuable and equally scarce, policy advocates always said, well, you can domesticate it or cultivate it. And it's often a big step for a lot of farmers to make that investment, both in land and time and material. So just to summarize some of the issues related to cultivation, it's essentially, Rattan could be fantastic for multi-strata agroforestry systems, but the lack of acceptance or adoptability by farmers really does impede any potential prospects for rattan cultivation in the longer term. But what we also looked into was sustainable wild management, and obviously rattan in the forest is an extremely valuable resource. Even though it's open access, it can be managed in a certain way, and all of the commercial species, they coppice, which means they produce multiple shoots from the same individual. But even so, there was a certain lack of commitment to long-term sustainability because of the open access nature of the tenure arrangements. But from Asia, and interestingly, we tried to transfer some of these technologies or concepts from the Asian perspective to West Central Africa, thinking about rattan agroforestry. Obviously, rattan is a climbing palm. It needs a tree or trees to be able to climb onto. So you have this multi-layer, multi-tiered system, which provides a wide range of goods and services. These types of forests have much higher carbon value. So if you're talking about REDD type approaches to forest conservation, rattan systems would be extremely attractive in that respect. And there's also been a long tradition in Asia of rattan gardens in multifunctional sort of agroforestry systems. And during my years at C4, a lot of researchers started to essentially work out that a lot of the rattan gardens that were prevalent in Kalimantan and Sulawesi, for example, were being replaced by other emerging economic opportunities, particularly oil palm, which undermine the old traditions of rattan gardens, particularly in, as I say, in Kalimantan and Sulawesi. So we had another aspect to the research that we were doing, and that was looking at improved processing and transformation. This was sort of born through a great collaboration with the Forestry Research Institute of Malaysia. And some of these technologies focused on oil curing or steam mending. So new technologies that African artisans really hadn't experienced before. We developed a series of training modules with collaboration with FRIM. And a number of scientists from FRIM actually came to Cameroon, Ghana, and Nigeria to train urban artisans in new technologies. And we did see longer term significant improvements both in product quality and obviously incomes of our target artisans. So there's great scope to introduce some of the technologies from Southeast Asia into Africa to produce better products and higher value products. So processing on site rather than exporting raw cane as was the case in many respects. In terms of gender, as I mentioned, rattan is primarily dominated by men, but in Southeast Asia, that gender orientation tends to change a little bit. And these are results from the Poverty and Environment Network study that C4 coordinated over a number of years, showing that men and women have often equal roles to play in terms of processed and unprocessed forest products. But in particular for subsistence, women had a greater role in the rattan sector. It wasn't necessarily recorded in official statistics. And an aspect of rattan production, which often goes sort of unnoticed, is that they do produce some very palatable palm shoots. So the very tip of the apical stem is extremely rich in vitamin B and other minerals. And harvesters in the field often will cut the cane, but also take the apical stem and either sell or consume locally. And it is extremely nutritious. So there's another aspect, a sort of another string to the bow of rattans, if you like. We've seen also that rattan, if we take the IKEA example, that rattan as a product is moving into the higher sort of quality sector, high quality furniture sector in many parts of the world. And we know that IKEA now have engaged with a number of institutions to look at sort of FSC certification, and they've been working in Laos and Vietnam, and I understand new initiatives in Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, but developing sort of certification guidelines for rattan supply to the commercial industries that companies like IKEA are moving towards. And there needs to be obviously an understanding of taxonomy, which species are being used, are they endangered, what are the harvesting rates, are they sustainable, what are the tenure arrangements, etc. So there's a lot of work to be done there, and I understand C4 and the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kia are involved in an initiative basically looking at some of these issues and really promoting the rattan industry from a much more commercialized perspective, but under the auspices of a certification scheme or series of certification schemes. So in terms of my conclusions, non-timber forest products, NTFPs, do make incredibly important contributions to rural livelihoods, and particularly for poorer groups. And as I mentioned before, they provide an important economic safety net in terms of medical need or need to pay school fees, etc. They're out there, the sort of hidden harvest from the forest, as if you like. And we know that rattan in the survey countries that we worked in are extremely important in terms of contributions to non-farm income. And we know that in certain respects, the harvest of high-value NTFPs such as rattan can be a lot less ecologically destructive than timber harvesting. And I've been working in Liberia, for example, on community forest management, and we've been shifting away from timber exploitation to a much more holistic understanding of the types of products that you can harvest over the course of a year, which are not focused on one particular resource, but are focused on a wide range of NTFP resources, not putting all your eggs into one basket, essentially. Further conclusions, we know that the urban rattan sector is extremely profitable, but we are also concerned about the increasing scarcity of the resource. We obviously understand there's an urgent need for better resource management. How that happens, is it community forest management? Is it enforced control by forestry authorities? That has to be discussed. And we also know that the introduction of the new technologies from Southeast Asia has had real positive development impacts, and as a great example of South-South cooperation, the type of collaboration that we should be encouraging more and more. And in terms of policy, I mentioned earlier there are policy implications of some of this. Many of the high-value NTFPs from West Central Africa, including rattan, are still part of what we term the informal economy. They're not taxed, there's no quota system, very little licensing going on, and so very little of the income generated really enters the formal forest economy. So they're sort of unseen products, if you like. And we also need to basically include specific guidelines for NTFP harvest and trade in the forestry codes of producer countries to capture these non-timber revenues. And FAO have produced a number of papers in the last couple of years looking at how this might be possible. And Julia Muir in particular has been leading a whole body of work looking at integrating some of these NTFPs into the formal forest economy with good success, actually, and very interesting stuff going on. We need to also make sure that local people are the sort of custodians of harvesting rattan, and a lot of the rattan harvested in the areas that we were working in is from outsiders, and often pay a very cursory fee to local communities for access to the rattan resource. And maybe that needs to change with much more formalization with the forestry sector. Just a quick summary of how rattan contributes to the Sustainable Development Goals. The ones ringed there are the sort of primary contributions to alleviating poverty, contributing rather to climate action, life on land, partnerships, etc. And also more secondary contributions to gender equality, zero hunger, etc., etc. So it's nice to link some of these systems to the broader development agenda as well. So it was fantastic to see Lorenzo's talk about rattan bone implants. I touched on this when we were at Bark 2 years ago for the 20th anniversary of IMBAR. And from a personal perspective, I have experience of this. I broke my arm extremely badly playing football about 10 years ago. And I had 3 major operations on my arm, which ended in a bone transplant. And the reason why is because my implant failed, and I was looking like this for more than a year. And if I had my chance again, I would certainly go for a Rattan implant, particularly as I did my PhD on Rattan. So it was a nice personal connection there, seeing Lorenzo's talk and me lamenting the fact they filled me full of titanium rather than Rattan. So I just want to touch on the fact that a lot of the research I presented was undertaken under the auspices of an initiative called the African Rattan Research Programme, which was led by University College London and the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew. We work with many international and national partners, and we're funded primarily by the UK's Department for International Development from over a period of 6 or 7 years in the early 2000s. And that work is now being continued on by a formal research and development NGO based in Cameroon, FOREP, and they're doing fantastic work still, continuing on the work of the African Rattan Research Programme, but also looking at other NTFPs as well. And yeah, they're doing a fantastic job. And it's great to see that the exit strategy that we had in place really, in this case, succeeded. And at that stage, I'll thank you for allowing me to speak and share my experiences, and we'll welcome any questions, interventions, etc. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so Prof. Terry, we are the one thanking you for the very rich presentation. I think you really did a very good coverage of the knowledge available on Rattan in Cameroon, Nigeria, and Ghana. Very happy that you came back on the field guide to the Rattans of Africa, because today it is really used as kind of a Bible for most of those who wants to get into the forest for research. I was very happy to know that, particularly in Ghana, Rattan is used as a financial emergency to help those who have punctual problems in terms of attending to a family member for health reasons or for education. From a gender perspective, we noted that so far, at least for the urban artisan, it is male dominated. Around 99% of the males are engaged in the rattan industry. And we were very happy to know that he has very high income with approximately $500 per month, which is something very good. And it holds a very good profit margin. But unfortunately, due to overexploitation and lack of management, these artisans are facing increased scarcity in terms of raw material. That is also experienced in Cameroon. So this gives us room to think about the cultivation of rattan, something that you have started, and that the first results have shown that once established, we have good growth of rattan, especially the fact that you mentioned that rattan agroforestry is ideal production. So maybe there is room there to look on how we can couple rattan with other trees and other crops in order to address this problem of scarcity. So the future is very bright in terms of big companies like IKEA getting progressive interest in rattan, and also having passed some very good policies in terms of sustainability. So we believe that this due diligence in the supply chain that IKEA and others will do is going to improve the sustainable management of the rattan resource. I noted particularly that rattan is
Oh, we can't hear Renee now. Renee, are you back? I think he was cut off for a while.
Hello, Renee, can you hear me? If it's possible, you can close your camera, maybe internet is good, because I think your internet is connection is not good. You can close your camera.
Yeah, okay. Dr. Sunderland and Lorenzo, you could see some of the questions coming from the participants at the chat box. And when Renee is trying to coming back, maybe you can look at it. And see if you could answer one or two. Let me see.
If I may, I can answer a question from my old colleague, Dr. Vongvilai from Laos. He's asking, do farmers request permits from the government to harvest rattan in Africa? Only in Ghana is that formalized. In Nigeria and Cameroon, it's not. And in other countries that I've worked, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Congo, it's not. It varies by country. But in general, rattan is not a formal non-timber forest product. So, you know, it's a sort of age-old problem. If a forest officer sees somebody transporting rattan, he or she may not have a permit because there's no permit to be made available. So there will be a certain amount of roadside financial exchange, if you know what I mean, based on the ambiguity of that situation.
Good. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Very sorry. I had some technical issues, but I'm happy to be back. So I think I was addressing the issue of the contribution of Rattan to SDG7, affordable and renewable energy. But I think Professor Terry will have a chance to come back on it. And also, I'm very happy to hear that FOREP in Cameroon is working on Rattan. We have not formally, in our office in Cameroon, we have not formally engaged with them, but I think one of the output of this webinar would be to interact with them. So Professor Terry, thanks very much for this presentation. Please hold on. We have a couple of questions for you, and we are going to revert to you during the Q&A session.
Yeah, just for your information, Renee, Dr. Sunderland has answered one of the questions when you are away. So because I said to fill the time, so it's better for them to answer.
That was a very smart way to address my blackout.
Yeah, we thank you, Dr. Sunderland, for answering the question. Yeah.
No problem at all. No problem at all.
Yeah.
Friend based in Indonesia, Dr. Cristianto, who is going to talk about. Yes, Jinwei, come in.
Yes, we can start the third presenter now.
Very good. So that will be Dr. Cristianto Sriyanto. I hope I am not pronouncing too bad the name of my friend. So Dr. Cristianto is a researcher with expertise on wood processing technology, wood anatomist, and non-timber forest product expert with experience. And he is currently working for a forest product research and development center for the in Indonesia. So he has led a lot of studies, and now he's focusing on rattan processing using microwave oven for drying and bending. Since 2018, he is the Deputy Director of Program and Collaboration Research Development and Innovation Agency of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry of the Republic of Indonesia. So today, Dr. Cristianto is going to present on Indonesian rattan stem anatomy, possible microwave technology to optimize the rattan processing. And I think this presentation is very complementary to what Dr. Terry just talked about on how we can improve the use of rattan. So Chris, please, could you share your screen, unmute your microphone, and come in. The floor is for you for 25 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Renee. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone, and also good night from any part of the world. My name is Chris Sugianto. You can call me Chris. And yes, I just enacting Deputy Director of Program and Collaboration from the FORDA, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And starting this year, I'll back to be a research scientist at the Forest Product Research and Development Center. Thank you for inviting me to have a talk in this seminar webinar. And yes, it's I'm talking about the project that I did in 2018. That was about 3 years ago, there before I become a deputy director. And my talk will be divided into some of the aspect: introduction, harvesting, and primary processing. I think everybody knows about Rattan, and also in the secondary processing and the anatomical properties of Rattan. And I was amazed what Lorenzo present this earlier, that Rattan is potential for a green bone. And I'm also going to talk about the microwave technology. It's not a high technology, but it's only the microwave oven that we use, and we found it in the kitchen. And the last one is what the laminated rattan canes. That's part of the utilizing rattan for the large diameter. As you may know, that Rattan is a spiny climbing palms, belong to family Palmae and subfamily Calamoideae. And as everybody mentioned, that about 614 species is in Asia, and about 300 of them is grown in Indonesia, and about 51 species are known as what they call it commercial species. But I think it's less than 20 is known as elite species. So we know Mano is one of them, and Sega and Batang and Semambu is some of the what we call it not only commercial, but it's also we call it elite species. And as you may know that rattan stems are mature and ready for harvesting when the stems are exposed or open after the leaf seed has dropped. And it should only be mature rattan canes are harvested. This is the picture of harvesting rattan in Indonesia and in some of the country. And basically the proper rattan harvesting is include cutting the stem at the base and dragging rattan out of canopy and removing the leaf seeds and discharging the immature portion and cutting the canes into suitable lengths for bundling and transporting the canes for processing. The age of our harvesting, like a Daimanoropes or Calamus, is about 6 years. And then like some of the rattan in Indonesia is about 5 to 10 years. So it depends on the site location and also the species. When the primary processing, as we know that we call it post-harvest treatments, we call it includes drying, oil curing, bleaching, deglazing, and fumigation. Because we are aiming for a rattan for furniture, so this is very important if we are exporting rattan from Indonesia or from ASEAN countries. Some of them has been treated with chemical, and we in Indonesia we known as WS or wash and sulfurized rattan, or we call it in half process. So the primary processing is aiming to avoid defects and increase processing possibilities of market value. So this is the deglazing, because the surface of the rattan, they have a silica that the outer part of rattan stem, we call it the epidermis, is heavily encrusted with amorphous silica, which hinder the processing. This silica must be flaked away or deglazed, or we call it in Bahasa Indonesia is runti, by bending the stem and repeating along its length. And in drying, we usually, because the initial moisture content of rattan is very high, about 130% until 160. So they put it, they cut it, they bundling it about 20 or 30 canes, keep it in erect position for about 1 week. They usually do it in the forest. And then that's allow the rattan to drain the sap and water. And then spread open in open yard for about 2 and 3 weeks to achieve moisture content to about 20%. This is what I mentioned, that in drying, if we talk about 3 weeks or about 1 month outside, it's very risky because it's susceptible. Rattan is susceptible to fungal and also the insects. So when I'm talking about the microwave technology, it can dry the rattan in minutes. I mean, we don't have to wait until 2 or 3 weeks outside. We can do it properly, and it's not a high tech because we only using the microwave oven. And the next one is the boiling and curing. As you may know that the curing is the immersion canes in the hot oil bath to prevent deterioration by reducing moisture content. So in the case of reducing moisture content, we can also use the microwave. So I'm trying to replacing this oil bathing and also the boiling and also accelerating the drying. And we know the curing, if we put oil bundle to help to remove the waxy materials, resins, gums, and to improve color quality, improve texture and flexibility, and prevents from fungal and insect attack. As in the market, people just wants only buy the rattan if they can smell the kerosene. So the oil bathing is very important as the value of the market. So the most composition of the oil mixture are diesel, cooking oil, or the mixture of them. And basically they're using kerosene is, some people said is better. And they heat them at about 60 to 150 centigrade and about 5 to 40 minutes. It depends on the species. After curing, the excess of the oil drains away from the treated canes, and the canes are rubbed with sawdust, coir, or coconut husk fiber, or rag waste, and garnish tack to remove waxy substance. That's similar when I'm trying to replace the oil bathing with the microwave. The resin is come out from the rattan, and we still need to wrap it because to drain away, to wrap it with the sawdust, so the resin can be cleaned from the rattan surfaces. Bleaching. After that, we talking about the bleaching. The high value rattan is mostly whitish or light yellowish. So after they have oil bathing, they dry it in outside the yard, and the sunshine make it the rattan color become shiny yellowish bright or light yellow, and that's very important, and it's very valuable for the rattan. And we are using also the bleaching. They're using the gray brown rattan can be bleached using hydrogen peroxide and the sodium hypochlorite or other chemicals to better finish. And also the fumigation. This is the fumigation. They put it in the special chamber, and they're using the sulfur dioxide to sterilize the canes and improve the surface quality. The bleaching principle is they putting the sulfur dioxide, sterilize the canes, and the function of group of rattan for light color rattan. And in the secondary processing, as you may know, we call it pisau matahari, or we call it the knife, special knife with the core in the middle and also the small knife, small round in around them. It's the processing of the secondary, so that involves peeling, splitting, and steaming, and including the bending and also dyeing, sanding, finishing, and preventing the discoloration. Peeling is removing the outer layers to obtain the inner core, and splitting is dividing the cane into two. And we call it in Indonesia, we call it fitrit for the basketry. And after that, we know that it is very conventional and traditional use of rattan. We have basketry, and also we have furniture. In the furniture, and the most important, the most aesthetic rattan furniture is the bending or curvature shape. So the bending is very important. In Japan, in Cirebon, they have a traditional way. They're using the steam bending, and they for the pre-treatment. So they're using to bend it manually, after the steaming. I'm talking about the microwave can replace the steaming. So the steaming, they put it as about 20 to 30 minutes to plasticize the rattan canes, and the canes can bend easily into curvature shape. So when we're replacing the steaming with the microwave, we're talking about the clean process replacing with the steaming. The steaming prior to bending could replace the microwave technology. So that's part of the having the furniture, and also we doing the bleaching. So they have the same color and they have the good shape of the furniture. This is the list of the rattan in Indonesia. There are 51, and it's divided into two. The large diameter rattan, which is the diameter is more than 18 millimeters, like Manau, Batang, and Semambu. And the other one is the small rattan, which is less than 18 millimeters. Basically, if the diameter is more than 30 millimeter, they won't use it because it's not appropriate for the furniture. That's why it's very useful if what Lorenzo presented this earlier, that the larger diameter of rattan can be used for the bone, for the green bone. And this is the anatomical properties of rattan. As you may know, that rattan is monocote. The cane is round, cylindrical, and with vascular bundle are embedded in the ground parenchyma tissue. The vascular bundle comprised of sclerenchyma, or also known as fiber bundle, metaxylem vessels, phloem, axial parenchyma, protoxylem, and also there is a resin canals in the ground parenchyma tissue. The protoxylem consists of elongated, thickened like a spring. I suggest this is because this spring that makes the rattan is easily bent, even without the steaming. But there is a limitation of bending. So the curvature shape there has to be plasticized with the heat. And this is some of the anatomical properties. From the identification purposes, it's very hard because basically the rattan anatomical properties is almost similar, but we can see in the peripheral cortex, there is some of them has a specific pattern that we can identify, like the calamus, and also this is the protoxylem. And as you can see, that anatomical properties in this area is, yes, in the peripheral, there is some of the pattern with the sclerenchyma on the fiber bundle. Sometimes is very large and small, and large and small, and that pattern is it can be used for the species identification. And also some of the from of Corhalsia, they have special what they call it yellow cap in the peripheral. So that's can be identified as a species of Corhalsia. Now I'm talking about the microwave technology. Microwave technology is not dangerous and is not expensive. It can be used for wood, timber, and also you can heat your food in the microwave oven. And basically, it's using the electromagnetic spectrum is higher than radio wave and also less than infrared. So the in the difference between conductive heating and so microwave heating is the waves can penetrate into the rattan or into the timber and also into bamboo, and they have a flip rotation. So they make a plus and minus, and this flicking, constantly flipping the molecule of the water. So the material has to be wet. There is enough moisture, enough water molecule inside the material, and then this molecule is flipping, and then flipping constantly, make it heated, and in this heat is provided. So the heat is coming from inside the material out. It's different with the conductive heating. The heating is coming from the out and coming inside. That's the difference between microwave heating and the conventional heating. In Australia, they're developing some of them, and I thought it was a very high technology and high cost, but like similarly, when we heat the pizza in the microwave oven, we can see the magnetron, we can see the capacitor, we can see that the oven itself is the the place where the waves and also the material meet. So I modify the microwave and also put the rattan, but it's only one by one. So the coming through, and as we can see that when coming through to the microwave, on the top, on the end of the rattan, they coming the moisture and also the resin, they coming, and it's very quickly. And if you can see, even the rattan is outside the chamber. It reached the 94.7 centigrade. And I was thinking it has not been developed, but since 2018, I was thinking to develop the microwave technology for drying rattan by using the wave that generate from the microwave oven. And also that's for the drying. And the second one is going for the bending. So we can use the microwave technology for the bending rattan to make a curvature shape. But we are using the microwave. As you may know that the microwave oven, you usually use the power of 100%, 50% or 25%. So we play with that. And also the speed of the rattan coming into the microwave. If it is very slow, so the energy is coming very high. So it's the rattan will shrink because it dries instantly. When it dries instantly, there is a shrinkage and there is a wrinkle on the top of the rattan. But we can manage by reducing the power, and we may only have the 25% of energy, and the speed of the rattan coming into the microwave oven is speed up. So it's more rapid. So the energy absorbed by rattan is less. And the last one is the laminated rattan. As I mentioned before, that in Indonesia, some of the rattan is particularly coming for the furniture. But again, if it is more than 30 millimeters in diameter, they now using it they cut it in a box like that, and then they glue it all together. And it's have a very good pattern with this rattan because there is no knot, and the fiber is very interesting. So that's what I'm talking right now. That everything that this is my study about 3 years ago about the microwaving rattan. It has not been developed, but we can combine some of the technology that microwave technology is viable for rattan purposes. And also we can dry rattan instantly even in the forest, because microwave we can now can be energized by battery and also by the solar power. And that's a proof that the technology can be implemented for rattan, this microwave technology, and can put the value added of this rattan. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rene. Thank you.
Chris, thanks very much for the very technical presentation. So I am happy that you have been able to go through the different processes of primary processing, which is about what is done shortly after harvesting in the forest, and also secondary processing. But I was very happy to notice that in Indonesia, rattan cane buyers are ready to provide a higher premium if the rattan cane have been oil bathed. Especially you mentioned a mixture of diesel and cooking oil, and that if they don't have this smell, then they are not ready to offer a very good price. This is very important because one thing that we are trying to do into Cameroon is to encourage rattan users to treat their rattan, because most of them do not do that. And you also brush over the secondary processing, but most importantly, the technique you're trying to use, which is the microwave technology. You insisted on the level of moisture which is required for this process. And you have mentioned that this new technique is applicable to rattan, although it is not yet used at a large scale. So my very first question to you will be, what is needed for this for your research result to be upscaled? What should be done? Do you believe that this approach is cheaper and can provide the same results as the ongoing or the traditional way that the Rattan artisans have been cooking bamboo? So please note my question. I will come back to you. So at this level, I would like to thank the three panelists and inform them that we are moving into a Q&A session. We have been able to note down some questions. So I will start with our very first speaker, who is Lorenzo. So we have some questions from the attendees, and they would like to have your insight. So we will start with my very good friend, Dulce Pudzelan in the Philippines. So she wants to know, how much does the Rattan prototype cost in USD? So she says, in the Philippines, some colleagues are developing bamboo prosthetic limbs and other health replacement products. So how much does this technology cost? If a patient, from the time the patient is diagnosed with some bone disorder to the surgery and everything, how much will that process cost? So the second question comes from Mexico. So I will give you three questions, Lorenzo, and then you will brush over them. The second question comes from Mexico, and he wants to know if bamboo can as well be used for this bone replacement as you're using rattan. So the last question comes from Ramon Razel, who is asking if a particular rattan species is important for bone regeneration, or if it only the diameter of the rattan that matters. So Lorenzo, those are the first three questions for you.
Okay, thank you for the question. So starting from the first one, but a comment that is general. So at the end of our manufacturing process, we do not have rattan anymore in our product. I mean, the chemistry of rattan is completely changed. And in fact, in the final product, no one single atoms of the original wood remains. What we move through the process and we preserve along the process is the internal 3D architecture of the original wood. Down the road, so at the end of the process, we have a material that follow in the basket of the bone substitute that are commercialized today on the market, and is purely synthetic from a chemical point of view. So the comparison in terms of price is, of course, with the other bone substitutes that are today available in the hospital. I cannot deliver the number because it's a matter, it's really, I apologize for that, it's really a confidential information that has to be managed with the health authorities and the hospitals along the commercial approach to the, for the product to the market. However, I can say that playing in the area of regenerative product, we believe to be price competitive, and we believe to be able to make a difference in terms of positive impact on the healthcare sustainability cost and also the social cost that these patients suffer having severe bone defects, severe bone damages. Like Professor Terry mentioned before, to have been subject of three different surgeries. We hope one of our goals is to reduce, of course, to provide a solution that can be successful with one surgery and not triggering multiple surgeries for the same patients. Rattan, before going to bamboo, I would like to comment about Rattan Manao and diameter. The researcher at the beginning tested different species of wood, and Rattan Manao was the one that demonstrated to be suitable to this very complicated chemical transformation. And so the species that we are using today is Rattan Manao. We are open to test other species also for our understanding, but at the moment, all what has been done successfully was achieved with Rattan Manao. And is also very related to the diameter, because the product we have to produce are of a certain dimension, and we need to start from large rattan can. We are using can also reaching 55, 60 millimeter in external diameter. And so this is one of the very important points we have to achieve also in building our supply chain. A certain species with a large diameter of large can diameter. If I can use another 30 seconds, sorry. I've seen an interesting question also referring to the regulation for the final product. Again, because at the end we do not have rattan as is anymore, we follow completely in the existing regulation. And so there is no need to have special regulation for rattan product in healthcare accordingly, at least for our product, because we can follow exactly the regulation and rules that are already existing in the different countries.
Lorenzo, I'd like to thank you very much for your answers, and I hope our attendees are satisfied with the answers. If not, please feel free to continue typing your questions in the chat zone, and we will convey those questions to the panelists. So on that, I'll move to Professor Terry. Professor Terry, also a series of 3 questions for you. The very first one comes from Vong Vilai from Laos. So Vong Vilai says, Laos has certified around 10,000 hectares of rattan forest, and he or she wishes to know if farmers in Africa, so here should be Ghana, Nigeria, and Cameroon, if they need rattan harvesting permits from the government before they can harvest their rattan. The second question comes from Abdullah. What types of problems are mainly arising from the species cultivation and marketing processes in Africa? And what about artificial regeneration of rattan? How does it fit within the agroforestry system? And the last question for this series, that within the studies undertaken in Ghana, which of the rattan species will be suitable for cultivation for commercial importance or innovation application? Professor.
I think he's off. Okay, he's back. Rene?
Yes, Jinwei.
Yes.
I don't know if Terry is connected.
No, I'm here. You phased out for a little bit there. The first question from Dr. Vong Vilai from Laos, I answered while you were in the ether space. Basically, the answer to that question is it depends by country. In Ghana, rattan harvesters need some kind of permit. In other countries, Nigeria, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Congo, no real permits are available through the forestry system, and that's why you get this ambiguity in terms of when a forestry officer finds a Rattan truck loaded, ready to heading for I don't know, Lagos or Douala, he or she will informally tax that that resource on the side of the road. So it depends by country, but primarily there are very few formal processes to get licenses to harvest rattan. So it's again part of the informal forestry system. The second question is about the issue related to cultivation and marketing and artificial regeneration. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, so that's right.
So the answer to that is it's a tough one, because when we did the cultivation trials, we focused very much on the commercial species. And they were the species that grow fastest. They have the best market possibilities or potential. But still, there was very little interest in on-farm cultivation. We were very successful in developing some commercial pilot plantations with the Cameroon Development Corporation, for example, so growing rattan under rubber canopy. But the same systems that are in Southeast Asia of rattan gardens, you know, these multi-strata, very complex agroforestry systems, are not in the same way encouraged or have reached many parts of West and Central Africa. So even though I've worked with C4 and ICRAF, the International Center for Research in Agroforestry, rattan sort of really remains on the periphery of their sort of species focus. So I think that's something that could possibly change, and particularly if there was interest commercially, if a company like IKEA had a focus on West Africa, for example, that would be another way of looking at incorporating rattan into much more formal agroforestry systems in the humid forest zones. And the third question was related to species selection in Ghana. Now, in Ghana is interesting actually, because there was a species of rattan that was classified under a name that essentially was not that species. So we described that as a new species, even though it was very widely used in Ghana. It's Lacosperma, no, sorry, Emeraspedia transfieldii, and that's the main species that's harvested in Ghana. That and the small diameter cane, Emeraspedia macrocarpa. So you have the large diameter canes. There are two in Ghana: Lacosperma secundiflorum and the Emeraspedia transfieldii, and the small diameter cane, Emeraspedia macrocarpa. So they're the three main species in Ghana. The other species don't have the right anatomical properties to be used in any commercial way.
Good. Thank you very much for the answer. So I would turn to Dr. Chris. Dr. Chris, please, for the two previous questions, please, could you provide answers to those ones?
Yes, thank you, Rene. Firstly, I want to thank to everyone has supported me, particularly from the PORPRO and from MAPECI. But yes, for your first question is that I'm confident enough that this microwave technology can be applied in the field. That it's not cost you much, because the microwave oven is only $50 to $70 US. But I'm not sure about the microwave with the battery. But if we can bring the microwave inside of the forest, where people harvest the rattan, it's easier for them to treat them directly. And if we try to collaborate, that for 4 meters rattan, it needs about 1 cent US to dry it up for about 5 minutes. So it's very, very useful, and it's very clean process. And yes, I saw in the chat about the capacity of the rattan commodity in Indonesia. At the moment, we don't have any figure, because at the moment, Indonesia is banning the rattan export. So the rattan trade at the moment is coming from one land to the other land. It's mostly from Sumatra, Kalimantan, and Sulawesi to Java. So the central Java is where the rattan industry, and mostly for furniture. So we don't have any figure because sometimes they have their own group. They take or they buy from the farmer rattan from the other island. They send it in their own group and they process it in the central Java. And also, and the second question is about the resin. Resin of rattan, as we know that Diamonoropes draco, or we call it dragon blood, it's used for the medical. So the resin can be used for medical for that species. But for others, we haven't had any research on the rattan resin for any other use. But when I mentioned about the laminated rattan, the resin itself is hinder the properties of the gluing properties of rattan. So the good technology, if you want to glue rattan it's other, because there is a resin in it, it's very hard to glue. So we can use the microwaves to get exudate the resin and also to dry it and then glue it. But again, there is another way, there is another method, like if we use the oil bathing or boiling, it still can exudate the resin, and we can after that we can glue it all together, we can rattan laminate. Thanks, Rene.
Thanks very much, Chris. I think it's very important to understand that it is actually possible to glue rattan together, but for that we have to extrude the resin inside, because what I see with our artisan is that they use either pressure guns or the rattans together in furniture processing, while it is possible to glue the bamboo on the other side. So this is something that is very useful for the rattan furniture industry. The next question is addressed to both Dr. Cristiano and Dr. Terry, that from where is the rattan harvested in Asia? Is it from established plantation forest or from natural forest? So where does the junk of the material comes from?
Right. Yes. In Indonesia, the rattan is coming from the natural forest, and we have some of the plantation. But again, we back to the definition of this plantation forest, because if we planted a rattan, like people in central Kalimantan, like Dayak, they usually collect rattan from the natural forest, and they eat their fruit, and then they throw the rattan seed everywhere around their surrounding, and they can claim that it's a plantation, rattan plantation. But officially, we have some plantation, but we don't have any figure about the coverage of this rattan plantation. Traditionally, in the what we call it hutan adat or modified forest, yes, they plant rattan, and also in some industry they plant some rattan, but it's the figure is not coming in the officially. So when the question is coming on from the plantation or the natural, mostly from natural forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, Prof. Terry, please come in.
Yeah. Just to add, when we started our collaboration with FRIM, the Forestry Research Institute of Malaysia, I went to Sarawak, and they showed us. This is probably in the late 90s. Again, I'm feeling very old. But they showed us some plantations of Calamus manan and Calamus caesius that were planted under forest canopies, and these were full-on monoculture trees, monoculture rattan species. And at the time, they were even before the Rattans had matured, they were digging up the plantations. This is in the late 90s. And they were replacing them with oil palm because of the opportunity costs were much, much higher for oil palm. And they didn't see a future for the Rattan plantation industry, which was strange from my perspective. So there has been a lot of work done on plantation establishment of Rattan, particularly in Malaysia and Indonesia. But it sort of got circumvented by other economic crops, particularly oil palm.
Good. Is economically more valuable, at least to the farmers, compared to Rattan. The other question is still addressed to you, Dr. Terry, is why is it that in Africa, Rattan has been used for decades, but the domestication of Rattan is really lacking? Very few research, very few plantation established. How come that people, so many people, livelihood has been depending on these results, but have really done not much to support? And what is the role of the tenure issue within Africa?
I just missed the last part of the question. Can you just repeat that for me, please?
Yeah, what is the impact of land tenure problems within the establishment of this rattan plantation?
Yeah, this is a huge thing. It's not just with rattan, it's all NTFPs, non-timber forest products. So, you know, you have a high value non-timber forest product that's exploited from the forest, and people are very happy to use customary tenure arrangements to arrange within themselves who can harvest what at certain times, et cetera, et cetera. But actually planting some of those products on farmland is fraught with lots of conflict, lots of dispute. And one of the major problems that we found with our farmer adoptability studies is that people who don't have secure tenure will not plant permanent crops. And that's the issue. We had some success in convincing the Cameroon government to plant some pilot plantations, but I went back to Cameroon.
It's a real problem that has to be addressed by local governments.
Yes, exactly. And I went back to Cameroon in 2004, when I was there last there, 2016 maybe, and all the plantations that we'd established in collaboration with the Cameroon Development Corporation under different forest canopies had been, again, like in Asia, had been removed because they didn't feel that they were of commercial value enough. So we have to find a market, and you know, and I'm looking at Lorenzo's fantastic presentation and the requirement for a certain number of or a certain quota of products to supply the orthopaedic industry. Same with IKEA. There's always a strong focus on Asia, but I've always been a very strong advocate of let's look at Africa as well, because anatomically the rattans there are very similar to those in Asia. It might be different species, but anatomically they're very similar. And there may be opportunities to actually develop these markets, which would then stimulate that plantation, cultivation type agroforestry system. And farmers will only sell when they're guaranteed of a market. And in much of the rattan growing zone, if they feel that they can cultivate in the forest or harvest in the forest, they're not going to invest in a plantation crop.
Very good. So in summary, I've noted down two key issues. The very first one is to create market for those who are planting, cultivating by rattan, so that they see the direct benefits. And the other one would be for the government to address the land tenure issues. The next question comes from my friend Pradella in Philippines, and it's addressed to Lorenzo. She wishes to know if we have any technical committee within ISO, which is working on health application of organization around the world, which is working in addressing the application of rattan in medical field. Over to you, Lorenzo.
Well, if I got well, the question was about if an ISO or do exist in order to have rattan used for purposes like healthcare, am I right?
Yes.
So as far as I know, the answer is not. So I'm not aware of any specific ISO dedicated to the use of rattan in the healthcare. Of course, this is an area of potential development in the future. In our case, we have developed the product accordingly with ISO for medical devices, because after the transformation of the product, as I said before, we follow in the ISO for medical devices, so we are able to reconduct our product and our activities in that arena. I think this is the first example of product coming from Rattan. But again, what is important, at least for us, is that at the end we have a material that derives from Rattan, but is not Rattan anymore, and so it's allowed to move forward development in compliance with existing ISO for medical devices.
Thank you very much. But this will be a secondary question. You talked about the authorization of the European health authorities to use this. What is the position of that standard? Is it a higher requirement than I, or is it a lower one? And how does that authorization you got from the European Union inform the ISO standard?
Well, the authorization from the European Union is granted when a medical device is demonstrated to be developed in compliance with ISO standard that refers to that specific application. And of course, it's an high requirement. It's an high level requirements that have to be followed and matched by any companies that develops product in a specific application field. And this is what we did during our development process. This is one of the reasons why we have an interest to develop a stable relationship, a business relationship also, of course, with the supplier of raw material, because we have a process that demonstrated how our product is in compliance with regulation. But of course, we would like also to secure the raw material that has to be, and to know exactly where it comes from, which is its features, how it grows, and so on. We have for the moment, let's say, solved this aspect buying rattan from a seller, but we would like to move a step further and go to the origin of the raw material and control the raw material since the beginning.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. It really sounds like due diligence that is done in wood to make sure that wood is sourced from a sustainable source, part of the VPA flag that Africa and Europe and the European Union has signed to make sure that when wood arrives in Europe, the person who is using the wood for a product making can actually state from which forest the wood was coming and how it was harvested. Thank you very much. The next question is for Chris. Chris Puzelan wishes to know which rattan species do you use for the microwave experiment? And is that an economically important rattan species in Indonesia? And was the outcome of the result positive to inform makers that this technology could be applicable to economically important rattan species in Indonesia?
Yes, thank you, Rene. Yes, my trial is for the Rattan Batang and also Tahiti and CL. So it's what we call it a large diameter rattan, and it works well. It reduced the moisture content from 120 to about 20% in about 5 minutes in the 2 meters length. So it's very easy. And when we're talking about the bending, so we have two stories for this microwave technology. One is for drying. The second one is for bending. The bend is very good because it's replacing the steaming. The funny thing is when we try it in the furniture maker, all of the house is got a blackout because the electricity is run out. So we have to retry it again with the smaller power. So yes, basically we only adjust to keep the moving of the rattan cane is lower, so the energy more coming to the canes, and it's positive because it can be bent easily because they're using manually, so we can actually measure is it how many force to use, but they said is easily bent until the minimum curvature of about 10 centimeters in diameter. Thank you, Rene.
Ask to Jinwei, do you have some questions for the panelists at this level? Or is there any question that I may have missed? Your microphone is muted. Can you unmute your mic?
Yes. Yes. I noticed that Dr. Lorenzo has mentioned that they need a lot of rattan resources every year for the making of the facility for bone transplant, and so I'm just wondering if this has become a very fixed number of supply, and I wonder if this has become a supply chain. I mean, for or say an industry which we could provide help or facilitate the supply chains to develop. Did I make it clear?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. So the number you have seen have been calculated on the basis of what is expected to be the potential market for the product, if of course as successful as we hope it will become. On the basis of the number of surgical procedures that are executed today on a worldwide basis. Now, we are moving in our growth. For instance, the last order we placed for Rattan was of about 2,000 can. And we have our plan is expected to have a manufacturing line suitable to produce, let's say, between 30,000–35,000 units a year in 3–4 years time from now. And at that stage, we may need, as for the presentation, about, let's say, 3–4–5,000 can every year of Rattan. Then if everything goes well, it moves to very important numbers, because again, if we consider the worldwide potential market, we can go up to more than 20–25,000 can every year, considering of course that there is a certain threshold of discharge pieces of wood, because maybe some imperfect shapes and so on. So there is a certain amount of wood that cannot enter the manufacturing process. So yes, the answer is I believe it could become a stable supply chain and hopefully a source of business also for the producer. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lorenzo. As I I noticed that Dr. Sunderland has mentioned that actually the rattan harvesters in the African country, actually they don't have the certificate for harvesting the rattan, or there's no any regulations regarding to the management of the rattan resources. So comparing to, there is such a big business at high-end markets there, and so maybe I think we should think about how to facilitate such a supply chain to be in place to benefit more people who need bone transplant, and to benefit more communities who are managing the rattan resources. After all, in the whole world, the rattan resources is dwindling, and because of non-protection of the forest, and because of the nobody is paying attention to these treasure resources. And however, as you mentioned, it has such a nice property, and can do very good for the medical bone surgery. And so we should actually raise awareness and pay attention. I mean, maybe that's what I mean. So you give us a very prosperous future market there. So that's what I want to know. I think it's a very good good answer. Yeah, and very good
Thank
news.
you so much. I can just confirm that we are thank you so much. I can just confirm that we are very open to move forward our newborn collaboration with this end goal in mind. And certainly, I mean, we have to provide the market with a very regulated product, and so we need also to, let's say, to create a regulated a supply chain that can follow in the regulated environment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Inui and Dr. Lorenzo, for that exchange. I think this application of rattan for bone replacement addresses one of the issues that was raised by Professor Terry, which is the fact that people keep replacing by other land uses because there's no think the income that could be generated by the growers would be very important. We also have to engage with our governments to make sure that land tenure issues are addressed, because one of the conclusions of Professor Terry was that people don't engage in land. So on this, I would like to give 2 minutes each to our panelists for concluding remarks and for the message that they wishes our attendees to retain from their presentation. So I will start with Dr. Cristiano. Over to you for 2 minutes for.
Thank you, Rene. So thank you for everyone for giving me the chance to present my research work. And also this microwave technology is viable for rattan, basically for drying and also for rattan bending. And also it's reduced the firing the wood for heating the steam. So it's viable and it's ready to be developed. And regarding to the technology that has been developed by Lorenzo, I think Indonesia is more than a species that can be also viable for the green bone rattan to support them. And also the problem is that we have a regulation that we are not allowed to export rattan in the raw material as a raw material. But basically we will support if because there are 51 commercial rattan, will support the green bone technology. And also for this from my perspective is we have to improve the technology of rattan by implementing the technology which is easy and to get people surrounding the forest get involved. And the most important is to improve the valuable of rattan from the people around the forest. Thank you very much.
Chris, thanks very much for your concluding remarks. Lorenzo, over to you. 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Rene. I would like again to thank everybody and Professor Terry, Professor Chris. We have a much deeper understanding of the fascinating word behind the name Rattan. So there is a lot of science, a lot of understanding, and let's say a lot of know-how that your organization have, your experts have. And I'm sure this is a great place for us to be. And we are extremely proud to move forward the conversation, which all of you and everybody in the audience that would like to connect with us. I think that also Alberto, my colleague, provide his email. So feel free to get in contact with us. We are happy for that. And I'm sure we have a lot to do together in the near future.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Yeah, Professor Terry, over to you for your concluding remarks, 2 minutes.
Okay, well, as you're probably aware, I'm based in Vancouver, where it's 3 a.m. So I will try and keep my intervention relatively short. It's been a long day. Just to say, it's been a fantastic seminar, and I've really appreciated being part of it. And the thing I always say is I wave the flag for African rattans. Everybody's focused on Asia because that's where they see the main center of production for rattan. And there are comparable high quality species of rattan in Africa. There are producers that need investment. I think there's great focus and potential on developing the African rattan sector much more than it has been over the last few years. And I see initiatives like Greenbone and IKEA and all these kind of commercial type activities with huge needs for raw material that could be supplied in a sustainable, socially equitable way. And I think that there's great potential to work together on that. So I'll end there because I'll probably fall over and fall asleep fairly soon. But thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. I really appreciate it.
And we appreciate your presence here despite the ongoing time in Vancouver. You accepted to join us. Thanks very much. So before closing this session, I would like to appreciate the support from our colleagues who are behind the scene that we cannot see here. We are talking about Guo Yuchen, Hao Ying, Jurai, Qinghui. All these INBA staff are working day and night so that we should be able for the support. I would like to appreciate my colleague Jinwei for taking the initiative to co-host this. This is very much appreciated. I would like to thank all the attendees and for the very vivid and active participation to this webinar. We are going to work progressively to try to raise the profile of Rattan so that at least it gets to the level of bamboo. And on that, we count you all. I will not close this session without a special thank to all the Rattan task force members who have worked behind the scene to provide their comments on the concept note when we're still at the embryonic stage of this webinar. So on that, I thank you all for your time. I wish you good night for those who are in Canada, and a good day, good afternoon to others in other locations in the world. Thank you very much for your time, and bye-bye.